And we are live. I'm, of course, joined by Joshua Hamm today. We will be discussing the Texas GOP and the future of Texas. But first, before I do, I'd like to introduce my guest, Mr. Joshua. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Yourself, sir?
I'm doing pretty good as well. It's a pretty nice day.
Not too bad. A little warm outside, but it's Texas. What are you gonna do?
You expect the humidity in the South. That's what you live with.
Yes.
But if in case you don't know, Mr. Hamm ran for the state house in Texas, 10th, I think it was, right?
12th.
12th. He did not win that race, but he did do very well for his opponents, but over a million probably combined against him. So we did fairly well and impressed for him. And Mr. Hamm will also be talking about that later. But we'll be talking about Texas, of course, first, and the Texas GOP mainly. So would you like to start us out with that?
Sure. Yeah. The first thing I would say is that running for office, even though I lost, was an incredibly enlightening scenario. A lot of times you don't even know what you don't know until you start getting involved, right? So I thought that I could just go out there and talk about ideas. And I did great when I was talking about ideas. Like I would routinely get people like standing up and cheering and applauding, and you don't really get that very much when you're in debates and talking, right? So my ideas were very good, but I didn't have the other aspects that go with running a campaign. I didn't have a campaign manager, so I didn't have somebody to manage social media and respond to emails and do scheduling for me. Right? It was just me by myself, and part of understanding economics and business is that you don't want to try to accomplish everything on your own, right? Like you want people who are dedicated to accomplishing things. If what I'm good at is talking, then I need somebody else to be checking up on emails so that you can get all of the different uh, I forget what they're called, where endorsements from different organizations, and where you're filling out all of the different questions that people have, and you're putting your information out on social media. Well, if I'm doing those things, then I'm not talking to people. And what I'm good at is talking to people. And so every time I had to step away from talking to people to go and do these other pieces of campaigning that are incredibly important, then it was just death by a thousand cuts. And so I learned a whole lot from that in terms of what I need to do to build a much stronger team next time, as opposed to just trying to go out there on my own and thinking that I can make it work just because what does the libertarians always say? I have the best ideas, therefore I win. Nope, that ain't the real world. That ain't how it works. So I would say that was the most illuminating part, was recognizing how much it's a team sport, even though you only see the coach.
No, it's very true. It's like a basketball team. The coach is just as important as the players are.
Yeah. And LeBron James can be the greatest player that lives currently. And Michael Jackson may have been not Michael Jackson, the Chicago Bulls guy. What's Michael
Maybe it's
Jackson
Michael
win?
Jordan.
Jordan, thank you. Getting old. Michael Jordan, I think, is the greatest basketball player that ever was, but he would be the first to tell you he couldn't do it on his own. He needed those other people on the team. And so it's much the same way when you're talking about politics. We said it earlier. If you're going to play the game, you got to know the rules. And so if you're an outsider who's trying to make your way into this format that we don't know, then you're going to have to learn the rules so that you can become the most effective mind virus, so that you can shift the Overton window back towards liberty.
That's very true. And what you said there is very enlightening. Obviously, it's like a car engine. It needs the spark plugs as much as it needs like the gas hose. So it's a very complex machine.
Yeah. And you can run a very, very lean, efficient, or kind of inefficient, but regardless, a very simple two-stroke engine without much difficulty. But you're still going to need your fuel, your oil, your moving parts, your spark. You're still going to need those pieces. And then the trick is that after you have a functioning engine, then you can add more pieces and make it more powerful and more robust. Go into four-stroke, go into six-stroke, looking at your, doing all of those things. I was a diesel mechanic in the Army, right? And so you can evolve up, but your first thing that you have to do is have a functioning machine at all. And any functioning machine, even if it's incredibly inefficient, is going to vastly outperform the guy that's trying to mow his lawn with a pair of scissors, which was me. That was my fault.
And it doesn't help either when the other guys have tons of resources as well, which is very critical in campaigns.
Well, life isn't fair. We're never going to win if we're worried about fairness. It's going to be guerrilla warfare. But there's effective guerrilla warfare and there's ineffective guerrilla warfare. Choose.
That's very true. So what we wanted to get into today is the Texas GOP recently had their convention. They adopted this base platform, as many have been calling. Which does, I've heard it does have some really good points in it, which is great. We'd like to see this from the Republicans when they do good things, but we also have to criticize them for the bad. And in Texas, the bad, there still is a lot of bad, of course, that needs to be addressed.
I would say the bad is much less in the platform and much more in elected representatives not following the platform. I'll give you an example, right? If we go to page 40 under resolutions, this is the first resolution. Okay, let me read it for my my viewer impaired people. Regarding the 2020 election, we believe that the 2020 election violated Article 1 and 2 of the U.S. Constitution, that various secretaries of state illegally circumvented their state legislators in conducting their elections in multiple ways, including by allowing ballots to be received after November 3rd, 2020. We believe that substantial election fraud in key metropolitan areas significantly affected the results in 5 key states in favor of Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. We reject the certified results of the 2020 presidential election, and we hold that acting President Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was not legitimately elected by the people of the United States. We strongly urge all Republicans to work to ensure election integrity and to show up to vote in November of 2022. Bring your friends and family, volunteer for your local Republicans, and overwhelm any possible fraud. Now, you tell me that is based beyond what you might have thought could have come out of the GOP convention.
That's way more base than you would expect.
Yes. And so if we had elected officials that just did what was in here, this would be DeSantis would not be King Liberty anymore. They're just scared.
Yeah, it's very true. DeSantis is the best we have because he actually does do some things. He actually uses power to fight back against like Disney and these corporations, and most Republicans are too afraid to do that. They just don't have the balls to use force like our enemies will. Our enemies will use the force and the power that they have against us whenever they want to.
Sure, and I had this conversation with a SREC Senior Republican Executive Committee, I think it is, or State Republican Executive Committee. I had a conversation with one of them where she was like, why are we talking about banning Democrats from being chair people on committees? And I said, because it's important, because they are already doing it. You still think this is a conversation, and it's not a conversation. They will use the part a lot of people forget is that they tell you what they believe, and they are not acting in hypocrisy in any way, because the only thing they believe is there is no truth but power. Believe them. They're not being hypocritical, regardless of whether how they change their opinions based upon polling, based upon, whatever some random ridiculous small minority group or what set thinks or says, or ACLU or what, doesn't matter, because they're not actually hypocritical. They are following their most important presupposition. There is no truth but power. Respond accordingly.
Exactly. Politics is fundamentally punishing your enemies and rewarding your friends. And this is something that most Republicans will just not understand at this point. Our enemies understand this very well and have been using it very effectively against us by punishing us and rewarding their friends. But, well, it's because most Republicans are not our friends, actually. They serve our enemies for the most part, I would say, with very few exceptions, obviously. Most of them are your McConnell types, you're just your mediocre, your Dan Crenshaws, Lindsey Graham's, these people who will say some things based occasionally, but will always stab you in the back when it counts.
I would say that those guys are actually in the minority as well. But the biggest difficulty I see is simply that we're in the river, and the river is liberal ideology. It's humanism, right? And so, pardon me. And so, your average Republican is like, well, yeah, we should totally, make sure that we've got, we want the maximum number of people voting. Whereas your base Republican is like, no, we want to only make sure that American citizens are voting, and we need to make sure that elections are protected. And your really based ones go, we really need to get away from universal suffrage because this is destroying our country.
No, what you brought up was actually a very fundamental thing that most Republicans are liberals, actually. They're just 10 years behind of where the current Democrats are. And this is a criticism we hear very often on the right, is that Republicans are just progressives going the speed limit, or I heard it wordly very differently, but basically going the speed limit.
Well, yeah, your average Republican is a right-wing liberal. That's the way to really understand it. We don't have an actual right wing in America. Not yet. We're getting there. We're starting to get some people who actually believe in nationalism, and you're seeing the rise of those who, America first, MAGA, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. The principle is that the purpose of the government should be for the protection and the uplifting of the American citizen. And that methodology, that entire concept, is not what currently is the right wing, because 90% of the right wing is just the right wing of liberalism. It's not actually right wing.
No, it isn't. And like we just saw with this recent gun bill, pretty much just siding with our enemies for brownie points with the media. It's just typical behavior that you would see from them with this gun bill. Letting the media pull their heartstrings, guiding them, shall we say, the narrative. And that they're going to act accordingly because they still buy into the fundamental principles, which is the problem, which is liberalism.
Right. But where the guerrilla of politics can get involved is, I'm going to assume that we believe somewhat similarly, but let's just verify, right? Do you believe that the GOP has strong leadership?
No.
Okay. So if the GOP does not have strong leadership, do you think it would be easier to take over the GOP and use that name to forward our ideas and beliefs, or to try to create something new and different?
I would say the better bet would be to try to take over the GOP, but that's not a very easy thing to do as a guerrilla force. But it's probably
No,
what will have to be done.
right. No, again, nobody is talking about easy. Life ain't fair. The people who are in power do not want to give up power. The GOP, less than stellar individuals that we have don't want to give up what little bit of power they have to protect the nation. And it's incredibly easy for your average person to to justify what they're doing, because they'll say, well, yeah, this is bad, but I mean, it'd be so much worse. And they're right. But the flip side is there are other people with different ideas that you've never even considered. And that can actually move it substantially more. I'll give an example. Education is on the is something we talk about a lot, because the leftists don't have kids, they steal ours. And so what I am putting out there is what GOP states, what red states should do, is they should make marksmanship a mandatory class for graduation from high school. See, that's a two-pronged approach. One, the communists will flee. They do not want their children engaged with firearms at all. The proto-communists, not the actual hardcore left-wingers. And two, that's actually fighting the culture war. Because if you raise a generation of young people to understand that they're responsible for their own defense, you have just changed the game in that state. Do you think they're going to sit there and just stand by while their cities are burned down if they have been taught that they're responsible for their own defense? You
Of
change
course
everything.
not.
That's how you actually fight the culture war. Now, you have to use the power of the state to make that happen, but that's not a bad thing if you're using the power of the state to help the citizenry as opposed to just putting your boot on their neck.
No, this is just something conservatives don't get. They're so afraid of actually using power, and they'll call you out as like a communist or a hypocrite for some reason, or cling to these principles or something. Whatever, I don't even know what those principles even are at this point. Of
Well,
whenever a conservative tries to use power.
the so the principles that they are, again, just a part of is the right wing of liberalism, right? And so their principles are, we need less government, because if we have less government, then we can have more individual autonomy, more individual liberty, and that's freedom. Because again, it's all based off of liberalism. It's based off of humanism, right? There is no universal truth. There is no universal beauty. These are just concepts that each individual makes up on their own, and it's how you create the atomized individual that we see today. Whereas an actual right wing would say, no, there is universal truth. There are things that are just true, and you must accept them, and that's called reality. And liberty, as it was originally understood, it did not mean that you're free to do whatever you want. It meant that you were free to do those things that made you better, right? You weren't able to sit there and engage in porn when we're talking about the founding of the country. That wasn't acceptable. Why? Because it didn't make you better. It wasn't good. So liberty with licentiousness is not good. I think that's the right word. I hate trying to use big words, but I can't remember them properly. Anyway, liberty to just do vices isn't actually freedom, because the heroin user doesn't have liberty. They are trapped in slavery to their desires, and they cannot escape them. And it is not loving or liberty to force them to have to fight that demon alone.
No, that's very true. And this is something the most GOP people won't get is that Unlimited free liberty without constraints is just slavery. It's slavery to whatever vice that you are, of course, predisposed to. It could be food, drugs, alcohol, whatever, name it. That's all it is, essentially. At the end of the day, it's not going to go any other way. Uncontrolled.
So I would say, first of all, I understand where those GOPers come from fairly well because I was there 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I was just your average, normal GOP conservative. Didn't really pay that much attention. Wasn't that interested. Like, life's going okay. It's only as things have gotten progressively worse that I've had to re-examine my thoughts and ideas and develop new ones. Because obviously the paradigm that I was working in doesn't work.
No, you're very true that the paradigm that they use will never work. Obviously, the paradigm that they're under is just going to be a continuation of of our enemies' worldview, just slower.
And so the second thing I would say that a lot of people struggle with is if you see a person with one arm, you'll understand that you can't hold them to the same standards of push-ups as a two-armed person. It's just not fair. It's not just, right? But we can't see the differences in intellectual capacity that people have. Now, we understand it when we're talking about our children. Like if I treated my 4-year-old, 2-year-old the same way that I treat my 14-year-old, everybody would say, that's kind of messed up. That 2-year-old cannot understand to the same degree that your 14-year-old can. But when it comes to politics, we just go, oh, yeah, no, the person who can, barely manage to take care of themselves should have exactly as much power as the person who is put together, right? Like there's a reason that when our country was founded, only property owners could vote. It was effectively an IQ / utility test. Like even if you're not that smart, but you're able to function in society well enough that you're able to gather wealth and become prosperous, good enough, right?
Yeah,
There's a reason it was
you
set
should
up
be
that
able
way.
to decide things in society because you've shown initiative, in overcoming some of your shortcomings, and
Yeah,
you would actually deserve a voice, but most people do
right.
not deserve a voice in our current state.
Yeah, you know, it, and as a father, I talk to my children, I get their input, and then I make a decision. What is it? I'm a benevolent dictator, is how I tell them. Where sometimes we'll do what they want, if it's not harmful or whatever, like, we'll see what happens. But there is no misunderstanding that they are actually running anything. That's not true. It's much the same way in the military. Like sometimes you can give your opinion, but when I was in the army, I used to say all the time, the only two things that I run is my mouth and 2 miles, because the army physical fitness test was 2 miles. And that's it. I don't run anything else. I am told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, to what degree, etc. And there's a lot of freedom that comes from that people do not understand.
Well, it's recognizing hierarchy, the natural hierarchy of human beings, because as our good friend Aaron McIntyre likes to say, people are not inherently equal. People are inherently unequal. Equality, egalitarianism is a false concept that comes from the French Revolution, and this blank slate equalism is just false. It
Yeah,
always has been false. Even in the French Revolution, it proved to be false because the leaders of that were elites. They were elite people. They were not the peasants. The peasants didn't run things. They were controlled by these people. So it's
right.
remained the same.
Well, it's exactly the same, and it's why I say that democracy in reality is the consolidation of power at the top, but the dispersal of responsibility to the lowest common denominator. And that's why no government official is ever held responsible. And beyond that, which general was held responsible for losing, pick a quote unquote conflict that we've been in? Which general has been held responsible? None.
None of them.
None of them. Which politician has been held responsible for literally anything? Personally responsible. The best we get is that sometimes they'll get thrown out. Sometimes. But they're not personally responsible. Their personal finances aren't hit. They're not thrown in jail. They don't face consequences for their decisions. And a lot of times they end up failing upwards. We got a person who actually sat there and denied the ability of people to be set free from wrongful convictions so she could have slave labor to fight wildfires in California, now our vice president. That's the most atrocious shit I've ever heard in my life from an elected official.
Well, it's just the example of how democracy works in our country, just in the current year. I mean, it becomes more obvious every single year that the system can't conceal its how it actually functions. That people's voting doesn't actually matter in the truth. The elites always decide how things run. These elite families, the Bidens, the politicians. The illusion gets less and less every year as their competence goes down.
Right. They're elite without actually being elite, which is the greatest shame of them all. If you were a corrupt elite, like this is the thing I liked about Trump, right? I didn't even vote for him in 2016. Because at that time I was still a normie boomercon, right? And I was like, oh, he doesn't understand the Constitution. I'm going to write in Ted Cruz. That's who I was in 2016. Now, granted, I lived in Texas, so I knew that my one vote really didn't matter that much. But that's how I thought in 2016. And in 2020, I was like, okay, he's literally the best that we've got because he's at least doing something. And even if the reason that he's doing the things he's doing is completely out of a desire to be loved, out of pure egotism, that's fine. As long as he's doing things that help people. Like I can work with an egotistical maniac that wants to be loved by people and so is doing things to help those people. Like you can work with that. I can work with politicians who have fear of the mob and therefore try to make votes that will appease the mob. It's like, got it. So I just need to round up a mob to get you to do what I want. Got it. I understand. I can work with that. But the elites who just think they're so much smarter while being retarded, like that's the worst of both worlds. Because you get the corruption with stupidity and ignorance. And it's like there's nothing you can do about that unless you're in a position that you have so much wealth and power that you can force them with your corruption, with their corruption. But that's not the position that guerrillas are in. We can work with others. It is not going to be possible for us to exert enough power to force corrupt, ignorant people to do what we want them to do. Those you have to sidestep, or you have to create alternative avenues.
No, that's very true with that metaphor. With the corrupt elite, you get the worst of both worlds, And this is some, at least with monarchies, the monarch actually he was accountable to the people to care for them, to keep society going. There is no accountability in democracy or any of the systems in the West. There was accountability in the monarchies in the 19th century.
I understand where you're at. And I'm not saying I disagree, by the way. The only thing that I would say is I attempt to work within the Overton window as it is. So I don't discuss monarchy. if we just were able to maneuver back to repealing the 16th Amendment, repealing the 17th Amendment, making it so only landowners could vote in a republic. Like, do I know what the end result of that would be? Sure, we'd end up right back here, right? But you at least can get people to buy into those ideas because they're within the framework of America and of her history and of her heritage, traditions, culture, etc. Attempting to move all the way to a monarchy, even though you might be correct, is beyond the mental ability of most people to imagine. And even if the few who could imagine it will get there on their own, it's going to be hard enough to get people to willingly give up their quote unquote power of suffrage. So I try to only work within the paradigm that is potential.
No, I get what you're saying. I just use it as like a reference for how society should work. How elites should work. I just use examples from the past that did work.
Yeah.
But yeah, you bring up a good point that we need to work in the Overton window and the narrative that most people in America can conceptualize, which is what your average normie can understand.
Well, especially if, let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that you have a really, really strong executive in some states, and he's pushing through things that will increase his power at the executive level, and he's doing things that help people, but he's still called a governor, and so people still think it's the same thing. But what he's doing is effectively creating a fiefdom. Doesn't that sound like winning? And you know what I'm talking about, of course, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, right? So instead of talking about monarchy, simply talk about the necessity for strong monarchs to hold the unaccountable bureaucrats accountable for their actions. And now you have stayed within the Overton window, and people can buy into it. Phrasing matters a lot, especially when we're talking politics.
Oh, that's very true. That's how the media is so effective in controlling the vast majority of people is their use of frame and the words that they use, especially during events that they like to use to manipulate, such as mass shootings. To push gun control, whatever it is at the current moment. Name your current thing. Of course, it's a great meme. I like it, but
Beautiful.
name the current thing and they'll push it. It shows you an example of how this frame control works, actually.
Yeah. And so this is a place where Republicans, again, are awful at marketing. They're just terrible at marketing, right? And so a lot of the stuff could be resolved if instead of simply saying, whoa, stop now, that's crazy, whoa, that's too much, whoa, if instead you started actually presenting solutions to problems instead of simply saying no, stop, no, well, then you can grab that narrative and utilize it to accomplish the goals that would actually enhance liberty, right? That's how you would do it. For example, we've got a mass shooting at a school. Be like, all right, guys, we are going to we're going to put out a call for veterans so that if they so want, we'll pay them 24 grand a year to be, guards at schools. Done. And then when they are sitting there and wringing their hands, you just bring up how you're trying to assist veterans with employment and defend schools. And then you start doing other stuff too. Hey, teachers that want to, it's not required, it's not mandatory, only for those who want to, we will provide training and education for you. And we'll give you a stipend. You will get extra money as a teacher if you are a defender. You gonna tell me that you can't, like, that's the problem, is that nobody sits there and actually puts forth solutions.
Well, yeah,
Take
most
the
of the
media's
time they
talking points and twist them in our favor.
yeah, most of the time they just bitch pretty much. They don't actually present solutions to the problems, and the solutions they present are just the same things they always, just they've changed the wording, they've rephrased something, but it's still the same thing. It's not actually going to fix the problem fundamentally.
Correct. Well, it's because for most of them, they've been on defense and scared for so long that they don't even know how to go about, mounting a credible offense for those few who even know that we're in a war, as opposed to, this 1990s, we're just trying to have a conversation, man. It's like, that ain't gonna fly. It ain't gonna work, because you can only do that when you are engaged in conversation with people who are actually engaged in true discourse. But that's not the situation that exists today. And so don't talk to me about what ought to be. Talk to me about what is.
No, that's very true. It's sad to see as well. And these people do, they have good intentions, some of them, but they fundamentally don't understand it. That they're missing that fundamental piece of getting the big picture.
My kid doesn't have bad intentions when he's running around with scissors. I still don't let him do it.
No, it should be the same for our leaders, but of course.
Well, and this comes back to bring it back to what we had originally been talking about, right? So, how do you become that leader? Okay. And the way that you do that is you get involved in real life with what's going on. We talked about it earlier. The GOP does not have good, strong leadership. And so, if you are showing up to your GOP meetings, if you are a precinct chair, if you're a county chair, then you have a lot of control over what happens there locally. One of the biggest methods of control that you would have is censuring politicians. So I had this come up when I was running for office, in which some of the grassroots people were like, well, okay, but if you happen to win, then how do we know that you're not going to be just as bad as this other guy? And the answer is, well, you censure me, right? Because we talked about earlier how finances are an important part of running a campaign. Well, what censure does is it says, for example, we of Brazos County say that this Republican has violated the presuppositions, the values of the Republican Party of Texas, based upon our platform and what we believe is best and true and just. And since he has not done what we want him to do according to this platform, or has actively acted against it, we publicly censure him and say he's a bad boy. Now, your average person is going to go, oh, great. You gave him a letter of warning. What does that do? Well, the answer to that is, do you think that guy's going to be able to raise money nearly as effectively if he doesn't even have the support of his own counties?
Of course not.
Of course not. That's the actual power. The power is when you sit there and say, bad monkey, and you slap him on the nose, well, now they can't make as much money. And so this forces them to resign and somebody else goes in. I think that something like 14 or 16 Texas GOP House members got censured by some of the counties in their district, and they resigned because of it. And that's not just true for Texas. That's true all over. You just have to control enough of the precincts, or enough precincts to make the county vote in favor of censure. And then now you hang that albatross on their neck and say, go ahead and fly, bucko. And the next guy is going to know that you know how the party apparatus works. Do you think that he's going to go against what you want if he just watched you humiliate the last guy because they didn't follow along with your platform?
No, they wouldn't.
No, right? The other thing, so that's one of the ways that you can shift the Overton window in regards to GOP politicians. And it's not just House. That can be your sheriff. That can be judges. That can be city councilmen and mayors, all kinds of stuff. You can do it at any level, right? But the other thing that you can do if you're involved is you can be active in your statewide convention. So, as an example, we talked about it earlier, and so I wanted to make sure that I brought this up. Back, what was it? April, I went to the precinct convention. And in the precinct convention, I wrote that I wanted the Republican Party of Texas to make a platform, a party platform, wherein the Texas National Guard would not be deployed for combat operations outside of Texas without a declaration of war from the United States Congress. And that's a big deal because we have not had an official declaration of war from Congress since World War II. Every single bit of this that's gone on the global American empire has been done without a declaration of war. It's military operations, it's peacekeeping operations, it's nation building, blah, 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 BS, right? So how do you start to restrain that BS? By using power. And so I pushed that through at the precinct convention. I pushed that through at the county convention. And then I knew some people who were working on the rules committee and the platform. And I don't know if you can pull it up or whatever, but if you're looking at page 37, number 263 of the Texas GOP platform for 2022, I'll read this aloud. Texas National Guard deployment and benefits. Congress shall not abdicate the war powers to the executive branch, except when under imminent threat and not to be used as a preemptive strike unless approved by Congress. It's pretty good. Second sentence. The Texas National Guard should only be deployed to overseas combat zones under authorization of Congress through a declaration of war. So I'm sure that there were multiple people, because hashtag Save the Guard has been around for a while and been trying to work through the system. So I'm sure I didn't do this alone. I'm not trying to pretend like that. But every small pebble stacks up until it ends up here, and you're shifting what's being done. And then it talks about benefits in regards to National Guard and wartime, which is not as important. It's important for veterans. It's less important for what we're talking about, which is using the 10th Amendment and the power that you have in a state to start breaking the legs of the federal government. And that's
You
how you do it.
also limit the reach of power as well by doing that, because Congress is it's very inefficient, and it's very difficult for them to get unanimous consent for these declarations of war, as you pointed out, just in that one example.
Yeah, it doesn't require unanimous consent for declaration of war, but that's immaterial. The point is, we still haven't had one since World War II. Part of the reason we haven't had one is because politicians don't want their name attached to a declaration of war. They don't want personal consequences, right? And so if your name is attached to a declaration of war, then all of a sudden when little Joey and Susie start dying overseas, parents go, why did you think it was important for my baby to die? And that's how you start holding people accountable. They don't want that accountability. That's why they defer it over to the executive. That's why almost all of the laws that actually affect us in day to day aren't through Congress. They're done via the executive. And so if we had an executive that actually used their power properly to defend the American citizenry, you could abolish a lot of it real fast. Just requires testicular fortitude, a virtue very lacking.
Definitely, it would be like taking a sledgehammer to this like glass table, just smashing it up, which would be very not very epic to see. We would very much like it, but the fundamental problem with this, and we saw this with Trump taking power and his executive orders. As soon as he got out of power, his orders were reversed immediately, and of course, because the judges, for the most part, are part of that swamp class that we like to call in DC, they'll overturn his and won't overturn the current executives.
Oh, there are solutions to that. It just requires a willingness.
Yeah, that is very true, but we're lacking that willingness for the most part.
Yes.
I am starting to see that change though with the younger generations like me.
Yeah, it's insane because I'm 38 years old, and yet in almost any political event, I'm the young guy. I'm assuming you're younger than me.
Gen Z, yes. I'm Gen Z.
So yeah, your generation is going to be the one that's going to pay the price for the stupidity of the prior generations. My generation paid the price with war in the Middle East, but that was only 1% max of my generation. The economic malaise that's going to strike this land that's been slowly bubbling for generations is going to be worst for y'all. And so I really hope that I can get more young people to get involved, to start doing things, because you don't get to be Caesar crossing the river by just being Caesar and crossing the river. That's not how it works. You need to actually start well before then. You need to be a successful person when it comes to business and or finances. You need to be a person who's exhibited leadership over other men, right? You need to have wins under your belt where you've been successful in leading those men against, opposition of some sort, right? And then you need to have the love of those men because they know that you'll protect them and lead them properly as you should. And only after all of those things are accomplished and you have enough men to accomplish it, then do you get to cross the river and become Caesar. Because before that, he was really just a businessman who was put in a position of power because of his excellence at business, right? He didn't become Caesar until it was necessary for him to become Caesar. But so few people are willing to take the steps that are necessary to become the person that can become Caesar, right? Like you don't just start building the ark. First, you got to be Noah. And that's where a lot of people really aren't listening and paying attention. Like, okay, you don't have the finances or the ability to run for office. Fine. Go and start working for somebody and be useful. Start learning skills. Go and volunteer to knock on doors and make phone calls. Go be uncomfortable and help people, right? Because the more that you help other people, the more that you're going to be able to start to gain a position in that political chain. And that's how you can gain power. I'll give you a prime example. Okay. Who do you think has more power, the elected politician or his chief of staff?
His chief of staff.
Yes. And that chief of staff is known by almost no one. For those who may not understand, I will exemplify with an illustration. Okay. Mr. American Populist, do you believe that the government should be interfering in families' personal medical decisions?
No.
Okay. Mr. Populist, do you believe that the government should allow the chemical castration and genital mutilation of children?
No.
So you just answered opposing. Because as chief of staff, when I put that poll out, I can get whatever answer I want. I can get an answer from American populist that says the majority of the population does not want government involved in the healthcare, aka private, private medical people can abuse children. Or I can get an answer that says that the majority of the population does not want children to be abused. And the only thing that changes is how I ask the question to get the answer I want to push the politician in the direction I want. Do you see the power of that?
It's huge.
Yes. And even if you're not chief of staff, if you're the aide to the chief of staff, you can probably have a hand in how that question gets written.
Or
This
one of
is
the
where
secretaries.
this is where your Zoomers who may not have, you know, they don't have the 20 years experience that I do. I'm not asking them to be me. That's ridiculous. Again, I don't expect my 2-year-old and my 14-year-old to act the same way. I don't expect 18 to 28-year-olds, especially if you haven't deployed to combat, to have anywhere near the same kind of resume that I do. But you don't need to. You just need to start being involved in local events, and so that you become a person that is trusted because you actually do the work that you're asked to do, and then you can start changing those dials and start squealing it just a little bit and making it better. That's all it takes.
It takes that little bit of turning the dial just a little bit to make some change.
Step by step. It took 100 years to get to where we are today.
No, and our enemies didn't start immediately pushing gay pride parades immediately as soon as they started getting these positions to power.
No.
It wouldn't have worked. Our society would have immediately destroyed that, and it would have been outlawed. But they didn't do that. They took
No.
the slow route, slowly subversion, slowly gaining powers.
Right. And so just become the mind virus in the GOP. Make them an actual right wing that believes in hierarchy, that believes in reality, that believes in America first. Become that change. Move that dial. And I know it sounds, too easy to be true, but dude, something I wanted got put in here and got voted on and got accepted. Another guy who's a friend of mine who's a young Republican, he's 24 or 25. His got put in here. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Go ahead and talk, and I'll find it.
Sure, what about?
It's your channel. Find something.
But this is very true. You can easily get involved in many of these local positions, which I advocate for, such as city councilman, precinct chair. Just be involved in your local GOP. I mean, these positions are like mostly run by old boomers who are retiring and want to get out of there anyway, but there just isn't enough energized young people who are, like me, have the will and the desire to get in these positions. So start getting into them, or if they're not retiring, become their secretary, aid them, start changing the dial in any way you can. There's many ways you could do this, volunteer to help your community, go, be part of a neighborhood watch or something, part of your local community. Strengthening your local community is the first part to having a healthy community and a network of trust. Because what we lack in this country is like networks of trust. We used to be a very high trust society. We lack that now. And that can be a big source of a lot of the problems we have in our society is this lack of trust, lack of high quality people running these positions of power at the state, local, name it. And so just start helping any way you can, but you have to actually start, is what I would encourage the young people listening to my channel. And that's what I'm trying to do. And that's for all of that starts with first improving yourself. So look at the problems in your life. If you're not strong, go work out. Start there. you know, improving your hygiene. Like most young people are antisocial and they lack social skills. Go out and just talk with people. Have one conversation with somebody. Just that one step right there makes you more capable.
I know it sounds trite, but I make it a point that every time I pump gas on my car, I talk to one person, whether it's the teller, whether it's somebody in the car next to me or something. I make it a point to practice speaking to people that I have no knowledge of whatsoever. And within 5 minutes of, while we're pumping gas and just standing there, within 5 minutes, we've had a conversation where we've been able to agree on something and build a little bit of a connection. Just start there. Just get to the point to where you can just talk to people, especially because in today's day and age, the ability to communicate effectively is going to pay you extraordinarily well. When nobody can talk well, when nobody has the ability to communicate, even to small groups, because they're all had their brains fried, if you can, then guess what? You're the one who's going to make the money, because skills that other people don't have are in high demand, and high demand equals high dollars. Make your money.
No, that's very true. Did you find that?
I can't find the number, but it's kind of here. So inappropriate and/or harmful content, and it's somewhere else in here too, which says that internet porn is going to we are pushing to have porn require 18 plus, which in effect is going to require porn companies to have to get credit cards, even for free porn, credit card information for validation,
That's
so
a
that
huge
nobody,
first step.
if we can get that, then it effectively bans porn. And again, we don't sell it as banning porn. We sell it as defending children. Do you not want to defend children from porn? Are you going to fight that battle?
Of course not. You wouldn't do
Of
that.
course not. Oh, well, it might hurt, the porn companies. What's more important to you, porn companies or children? Because I think children need to be defended. I mean, if you want to fight that battle, I'll fight you on that battle, right? So make the battles painful. That's how you win. That's how you change the culture. And so it's in here now. It's in here. Where effectively we're banning porn, but we're not banning porn. All we're doing is saying that we are going to hold porn companies responsible if they make it too easy for minors to access that pornography.
No, that's huge, especially for young men who are addicted, which is a lot of young men. So
Yes.
that's a great way to get it in.
Yes. And that was put in by that 25-year-old. He's the president of the Young Republicans now. Young Republicans goes all the way up to 40. I'm a member of the Young Republicans, right? He's the president of the local Young Republicans club, which means he's meeting local people. I've introduced him to the mayor. I've introduced him to people with power, and he's in charge of like 7 people, but he's the president of the local Young Republicans club. That gives you validity because you have that name and that organization behind you. So now you start doing more things. And his priority that he wanted got put in and got voted on. Heyo, can you do something like that where you're at? And I'll to speak about what you directly were talking about, because I'm moving to Indiana soon, right? And so when I move to Indiana, I'm gonna have to restart. I don't have my network that I have built up here over the last 13 years. And so when I get up there, I'm going to meet with local veterans groups and start meeting up with them and interacting with them. I'm going to have my kid, I'm going to be involved in a local church, probably going to go Catholic for the first time. because I was raised Protestant, and yeah, I think I'm going to go Catholic, and I'm going to bring my kids with me to that. Start doing events with the church, and I will find like uh, there's going to be the local GOP. I'll get involved with the local GOP, and maybe I'll find like one other thing, and that's it. I'm done. And the GOP is going to be like once or twice a month, maybe meetings, and the local veterans groups will be like once or twice a month, maybe meetings, and then churches every week, maybe twice a week. That's it. So that's not even a whole lot of time that I'm devoting to those things. But within 6 months, a year, but most likely 6 months, within 6 months of being a regular member of those groups, wherein they hear me, they talk to me, they get a feel for who I am, how I believe, etc. I am willing to bet $100 that within 6 months, somebody is going to be talking to me and asking me if I'm willing to run for office. Because everywhere they need good people, because somebody sucks where you're at. So I'm just going to build it. And you can too. But you have to be able to talk to people. And you have to make sure that you make it a priority to go in real life to these events and meet these people and shake their hands, look them in the eyes, and get to where they know you and you know them. And if you are dependable, they will ask you to help on things. And if you're dependable enough to actually show up and do what you're asked to do, then you will begin to gain responsibility and credibility, which will assist you in doing what it is you want to do, making the change that you want to make. Because if some random person comes up to you, Mr. Populous, and asks you for a favor, and you don't know this dude from Adam, your automatic gut reaction is going to be, why are you asking me for a favor? I don't know you. That's just how humans are, right? But if you go up to somebody and you do them favors and you help them and you assist them, then all of a sudden they will come to you and ask you, hey man, I really noticed all this hard work you've been doing. Is there anything I can do to help you out? Is there something you need? You're in.
No, that's it's so true. Being involved in these social organizations pays huge dividends for just your small investment, and also the skills you gain from that are just like they'll help you out throughout life too, just in anything, whether it's business, political, friend groups. I mean, these skills can't be bought, you know.
Maybe being able to be introduced to members of the opposite sex that don't suck horribly.
Yeah, it's you can't buy that.
No, you can't. You have to earn it through time.
Yeah, lots of things in life are that way. They aren't just handed to you on a silver platter as much as a lot of people think that they are. But I wanted to get into why the Texas GOP, you know, first we heard about this event in Dallas. I remember I talked with you about this on Twitter where they had this trans kids parade. No, it was a club in Dallas.
Yes. Yeah, Cassidy and Primetime crashed that. And our good buddy John. I wish I
Oh
knew him
yeah, the
personally, but I
APU,
don't.
yeah. Well, maybe I could get you connected with them. I do know people at the APU. So
Oh, okay. He's good people. John Doyle, that's it.
yeah, well, they held this event in Dallas, which is just utterly contemptible, utterly hideous to see, and it was allowed to go on without being stopped in a red state. It's just unacceptable to see things like this happen.
Well, here's the thing. It was allowed to go unabated for a while until enough of a stink was made. And then Dallas Police Department went in and removed the children from that establishment because enough heat was generated.
But you have to know where to apply that heat as well.
Yes. And part of the way that you learn to apply that heat is by starting to get involved and starting to get effective. There are so few people who will do anything that as long as you just show up and start being useful, people will find places to put you and you will start gathering intelligence and you will start gathering credibility. The credibility is quite possibly one of the most valuable currencies you can have, right? It's why I wear this thing right here. I don't really talk about it a whole lot. That's my Purple Heart pin from when I got blown up in Afghanistan. For people who know what it is, it's a big deal. For those who don't know what it is, I don't talk about it because if you don't know, you don't know, right? And that's the way it is for a lot of things. There are many people who will never have any clue or idea what I am, who I am, what I've done, blah blah blah. It doesn't matter, right? Because if I'm introduced by the person they do know, and that guy says, "Hey, you should listen to Josh. He's got some good ideas." Well, all of a sudden, I've got all the credibility I need. It doesn't matter about my degrees. It doesn't matter about, my experiences and blah. None of that matters, right? I'm not going to have people going, sources. Nope. Because I was introduced by someone they already respect. And that changes everything.
No,
Become the guy that gets introduced.
that's very true. How do you think all these people who got into the current admin, the current White House admin, got there? They knew people and were just, they were part of the club, so they were let in. They didn't have experience. They weren't the most qualified people in the world. I mean, you could just look at these people. They're very unimpressive people. But they knew
Yes.
the right people and they showed up to their side. And lots of people on our side aren't willing to have that effort. You need that zeal to show up and actually willing to change something.
And that's where the Zoomers could exert so much power and control if they would do it. Because you don't have wives and you don't have children. So start being useful to people with power. And those people with power will become willing to work with you and even for you in some instances if you're useful. If you're not useful, then you're just another voice screaming into the wind, and nobody has time for that.
No, your voices won't be concerned. They'll just be another email in the email box of a politician, which nobody reads besides a secretary.
Right.
It's just pointless. It's a waste of time and energy.
Yeah. But, I mean, how do I talk about this so I don't sound like I'm, just being like you only get a voice. You only get a vote when you show up. That's it. Right? Like I've met many people that I never would have met if I just would have kept my mouth shut and kept doing what I was doing. And in meeting those people, I'm sometimes able to have conversations with them. I'm sometimes able to change the way they think. I'm able to shift that dial just a little bit. That's what you got to do.
It's huge. It's game changing. Honestly,
it is. It's like everybody thinks that football is a game of yards, 100 yards, and it's not. It's a game of inches. Because when it's 4th and inches, that's when you really are paying attention to those inches. Right? You don't recognize it the rest of the time that it's a game of inches because you're looking for the big stuff. You're looking for the fancy stuff, right? We're not in that position. We don't have that kind of power. We just need to grind out every piece that we can. And the way that we do that is by just getting involved and changing those dials a little bit at a time towards hierarchy, towards order, because everything is chaos. And so it's going to require effort to exert order upon chaos. It's a
Yeah,
thankless job, but it's
anything
required.
that's worth something doesn't come free. It comes with tremendous effort and sweat on the brow, as I like to say, work. It doesn't come free. Anything that comes free comes with a price, usually, and you're usually the price that you pay. That's why these apps are free. These social media apps. Why do you think they're free? Because you're you're the product. They get your data, they get you addicted. I mean, nothing
Yes.
is free. You're the product.
Hmm.
It's just the
Yeah.
mindset shift that you need to have when thinking about these things. And a lot of people don't have that, or they're not willing to put in the effort or work.
Well, and a lot of people are just oblivious. They're not paying attention to what's going on. But we're going to assume that's not, the viewer base that we're looking at here. So for the viewer base that's here, it's generally going to fall under one, black pill, like there's no hope, there's nothing we can do, all is lost, woe is me. It's like, well, if you believe that way, then just go suck start, a tube, because it doesn't matter anyways. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe it's not as hopeless as you are trying to portray it to be, so that you can feel better about your laziness. Okay? So don't come to me with cries. It's not useful. I'm interested in utility. I'm not interested in your emotions. Okay? And then the second one is, well, there's I would like to help, but, and it's like, either you want to help or you don't. I'm not interested in buts, right? I'm married. It's the only butt I need. Not interested in anybody else's. Either be useful or get out of the way. I do not have the luxury of time to coddle people who want to be made to feel better because everything is falling apart around them. Yeah, I know it is. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? Because I gotta try. I have to at least be able to look my children in the eye and tell them that I've done everything in my power to try to make their lives better. That's my job. It's what I got to do. And I'm going to do it. And either you can get on board the bus and we can start traveling in the same direction. And if you're useful to me, then I'm going to help you out. And hopefully we can, work together to make you more powerful, to make me more powerful, so that we can begin to merge together and create a better future. Or you're not. And in that case, I just don't need you. I've got enough friends. I don't need you. I've got enough, I've got a wife and kids. I don't need you. If you're useful to the cause, then I need you, but only if you're useful.
I think the message we're trying to convey here is just be useful, be an asset. If you want change, you have to actually put your foot in the door to be that change. It's not just going to happen. Your politicians are just going to wake up one day and realize, oh, everything is going wrong. Really need to change something. No, that's not going to happen. You wouldn't be in his ear anyway. His assistant would be, or his executive, And
Right.
unless you're that person, you're not going to change his mind. He's not going to listen to you. He's not going to listen to your niche ideas on Twitter or something. That's not
Yeah.
how these politicians work.
Well, and even in the most black pilled doomer sense, I would much rather be warlord of a territory than be a serf. And so I'm going to work to gain political power so that even if everything just falls apart, at least I have a base of power and I can try and work to enforce order upon my area. And if that's all I can do, that's enough.
But you got to start.
Yes. Yeah. And as trite as it may be, it does start by cleaning your own damn room. It does start by not being a fat, out of shape, slovenly hack. And it's not just me talking to other people. I've lost 40 pounds in the last 6 months. I got another 40 to go. Because if I believe that it's a war, then I better take it seriously. So I need to lose weight. I need to be more fit. I hate wearing suits. I'm a blue collar diesel mechanic. I despise these wannabe elites that want to sit there and act like they're better than my salt of the earth brothers and sisters who actually make civilization function. I was an 18-wheeler driver. I used to drive back and forth with my dad from Houston to Edmonton, Alberta, and back every week. And when I was in the oil field, I worked 100 plus hours a week to make sure that I could do what I needed to do to take care of my family. I despise these snakes. But you know what? If I'm going to get involved in the game of politics and do what must be done to protect my children, then I got to wear a suit because people want somebody to represent them that looks good. I'm going to lose weight because I need to. I'm going to make it a point to get suits that fit better, that are fit for me. I hate it, but I'm going to do it. I went and bought boots I didn't want to buy. They're expensive for me because they're fancy boots. I mean, they were $100, but they're expensive to me. I'm a blue collar diesel mechanic, but I did it because it was required. If you're going to play the games, then you better know the rules. After you've won, then you can start to shift that a little bit. Then you can start to play with it a little bit. But you don't get to change things until you're in a position of power.
Yeah, you don't get to change the rule book of the game until you write the rule book.
That's
You
it.
can't expect to change the game with Battleship unless you write the rules for the game.
Yeah.
It's just
Even
not
my
how it
beard.
works.
I love my beard. But when I was running, do you think my beard was this long or was it more trimmed?
Trimmed.
Yes. Because old white women don't want to vote for a guy that looks like a lumberjack. So I made myself presentable. I still had a beard, but I made sure that it was nice and trimmed and looked good. Like, and you're gonna have the people who are like, oh, you're just, cucking to the blah blah blah. It's like that's why you'll lose. Because you're more interested in being right than you are in winning. And I am more interested in winning than in my own personal emotions.
Yeah, our enemies have this mindset, and look where they are. They control everything. They control They control the battlefield, so to say. They control the game. They
Hmm?
have the dice on the field. So if you want to be in that position, you need to adopt the mindset of winning. The left has this mindset drilled down perfectly: victory at all cost, suppression of their enemies at all cost.
And even then, I'm not victory at all costs, but I'm still a decent human being with virtues and values. But I recognize the utility of Machiavelli. I don't have to like it, but I recognize the utility. And so it's important. I've also read, you know, what's his name's Rules for Radicals, Alinsky. I read Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Why? Because I need that power. I need it to be able to actually affect change so that I can get the things through that will make life better for my children, for my community, for my nation. You don't just sit there and if you're playing chess, you don't get mad at your opponent because you published a book on how to beat you. You read it, you learn, then you do better. But we are so caught up in being right that we're not interested in winning. And that's why you need more soldiers to get involved because we care a whole lot more about winning. You get to decide about right and morality and ethics and all of those things that the shrinks care about. You get to worry about that stuff when you're alive. You don't get to worry about it when you're dead. And either it's a war and they are actively attempting to gather people for gulags, or you're just LARPing and you don't believe it. And so you just like saying the edgy stuff. I believe it. So I'm doing what I think is required to stop it. Are you?
Yeah, knowledge without application is useless. I mean, it's a great saying that I've heard. We've gone on 20 minutes over the hour, so I think I'll read some comments before we wrap up the stream, if that's okay with you,
Yeah,
Joshua.
go ahead.
All right. Mr. E says, Libertarian Soy Check. My principles, the battle of ideas, Giga Chad. That ain't the real world. That's not how it works. That's very true.
Yes.
Pete Budapest says, somebody better not tell Chip Roy what's in the platform, lol.
I think I've seen him a couple times say something about Chip Roy. Chip Roy may not be as good as some people might like. He's still fundamentally better than about 90% of the Texas House. If you make enemies of everyone that's in power, then you'll never be in power. Whereas, at least with Chip Roy, like when he talked against the January 6 people, he listened when he got incredible amounts of backlash and he changed his tune. I can buy that. Ted Cruz, at first when he talked about January 6th and called them domestic terrorists, nobody heard him, so he didn't change it. When it became public, he changed his phraseology on it. Why? Because he was scared. I can work with that, right? I don't require ideological purity from the people I'm working with. I just require efficacy. And Chip Roy is, if nothing else, at least been effective in throwing gears into the sand, or throwing sand into the gears at U.S. Congress and slowing things down and putting out information for people to get pissed about. Maybe that's all he can do. I'll take it. He's at least not an enemy.
At least he's doing something positive, is what I like to say. Pete Budapest again, the new GOP majority next year should move immediately to expel Pelosi, Schiff, Raskin, and others, only responding with equal force will stop this one-way power racket. Yes. Ideally, but we're not there yet.
I would say arrest them for sedition and treason. But we don't have that kind of power yet.
Nor are the people willing to do that yet.
No. Well, even if we had people that are willing, we don't have the power to do that yet. But you can start affecting things at the local and the state level and make their life hell.
Focus on what you can change, I would say, is the first thing that most people should do. Than worrying about these people like Pelosi. You're not going to attack Pelosi if you're just somebody who lives in South Carolina. It's not going to happen. She's got billions of dollars, friends with elites. It's not going to happen. So focus on your local area first.
Yeah. Focus on Lindsey Graham.
The GOP doesn't have leaders, period, as managers. That's very true. That's pretty accurate for the most part.
Right. And even a lot of those managers are inept and incompetent. So even if you don't have the personal skill set to be a leader, like maybe you're not an orator, maybe you've got skeletons in your closet or whatever, fine. Become a manager. Take over from the behind. Again, the cheapest staff versus the politician. I have no problem with Zoomers or people, who don't want the limelight to just sit there and start taking over behind the scenes. That's still winning. Still effective. Logistics matters. Administration matters.
That's very accurate. And we need more people. We need more people at these local positions because most of these people are just, it's empty, And you shouldn't be surprised when it's, granny boomers, running most of your counties, voting on these policies. If you want to change that, run. It's probably that simple in most cases.
I would say the greatest argument I've had with everybody who's local over the last 12 months has been me trying to red pill them on America War. And especially going, oh, how's Russia different than Iraq and Afghanistan? And slowly trying to red pill them on those things. But there's nobody to replace them.
So be that person.
Yes. Don't make me be the 40-year-old youngest person in the room. Stop it.
Yeah, there's plenty of you in the comment sections of our various live streamers, wherever you are in our sphere. There's thousands of you. So believe me, there's plenty of you who want to do this. You're just being lazy and making excuses for why you can't.
And if nothing else, out of pure selfishness, you're much more likely to get a girl if you have some kind of power than you are if you're a loser. Don't be a loser.
Nobody likes losers.
I mean, look at Swalwell. Did he get a Chinese hooker because of his looks or whatever? No. He got it because he had power. Now, hopefully you can be more ethical and moral in how you approach things, but if nothing else, become powerful. Just do it. Be amazed what you can accomplish.
You'd be amazed what you can accomplish when you put your mind to something. Something I've heard from my old man.
Yeah. It's even better when it's something that's useful as opposed to harmful.
And with that, Mr. Hamm, would you like to show anything before we head out?
No, I have no shills. My Twitter handle is up there. Feel free to follow me. I haven't monetized anything. I haven't done any of that stuff yet. I'll probably look into doing all of that whenever I get moved up to Indiana. My goal is to try to create a right-wing SOP boot camp type place where I can start to bring guerrillas, the dissidents, over and start training them on how to, run for office, how to become mayor, how to become councilman, how to become chiefs of staff and interns and start moving their way up the different hierarchical pyramids. That's kind of my game plan that I'm going to see if I can. I have no idea how to make it work, but that's what we need. We need some way to start getting people to understand the basics, and we need a boot camp for right-wing dissidents so that we can start to mobilize people more efficiently, more effectively.
Oh, I definitely agree, honestly. To harness some of that, guide the people, who want to be. A lot of people are lacking guidance on how to actually do these things. So if you would like to check that out, please check out his Twitter. I mean, he's available if you want to ask him questions. So
yeah.
Say that.
My DMs are open and whatnot. If I don't like you, I'll just block you. No biggie.
All right, if you did enjoy that live stream, it was an excellent discussion with Mr. Joshua. Really enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, as I greatly appreciate it, and have an